that means. This is absolutely Orwellian. Can we turn to crime? As you know, the politicians, leaders in San Francisco vowed to defund the police and then did a 180 when, I don't know, crime went up. They wanted to defund the police, diverted a bunch of money away from the police department, and then crime went up. Homicides went up. Shootings went up. Smash and grabs went up. And add to that the number of people that were looting high-end stores, because after all, you can take up to $950 worth of merchandise without any real consequence. Watch this.
The police department here in Minneapolis needs to be dismantled, and we need to start anew.
We've been doing policing all wrong for decades. In some cities, 40% of the budget goes toward policing, and police are terrorizing Black and brown communities. The evidence is clear across the country.
We will redirect $120 million from law enforcement to support these priorities over the next 2 years. Let me repeat that. This is $120 million. It's a first step.
But it's clear that law enforcement is not always the appropriate avenue to deal with these issues. Today, the chief and I are announcing an initial $76 million in reductions to the 2021 budget.
Hey, why is it that the NYPD gets $6 billion, but our housing doesn't get that much, our youth services don't get that much, our health services don't get that much combined? Like, why do we need tanks? When people ask me what does a world where we defund the police, where, defunding police looks like, I tell them it looks like a suburb.
A world where we defund the police looks like a suburb. Suburbs have a lot of police, and they have private police to supplement the public police. And they got high walls, and they got burglar alarms. San Francisco, getting back to them, diverted $120 million from the police and sheriff department in 2020. And Mayor London Breed was among the politicians who joined the chorus of leaders saying, defund the police, divert funds from the police for youth programs, for housing programs, for all sorts of programs. Here is what the mayor of San Francisco, Breed, said on July 31, 2020, and I quote, "We will direct $120 million from law enforcement to support these priorities over the next 2 years." Let me repeat that, she said. This is $120 million, end of quote. Equity. Focusing agency codes of conduct, including racial competencies in job descriptions. Racial competencies in job descriptions. And integrating racial equity criteria into work plan expectations. Integrating racial equity criteria into work plan expectations. The devil does that even mean? And performance evaluations tied to promotions and merit pay increases based upon whether or not you have met the racial equity criteria. The document makes it clear that, quote, politics and power dynamics are forces to be harnessed. Like oil, coal, nuclear, natural gas. Politics and power dynamics are forces to be harnessed to advance the federal racial equity initiative. And the guide openly embraces critical race theory and cites a critical race theorist named Nicole Hannah Jones. She's the one that was responsible for the 619 project that was done by the New York Times. One section suggests that we, quote, cultivate a pipeline, obviously not an oil and gas pipeline, cultivating a pipeline of potential champions in Congress to ensure political support across administrations. The guide instructs those within agencies to, quote, grow a critical mass of staff committed to racial equity and to take part in dismantling systemic racism, end of quote. That he was at the scene. Half hour. No suspect arrested or identified. Investigation is still ongoing. And during the commotion outside of the club, a bunch of people were fighting. A driver plowed through the crowd that was in the street, striking several people at high speed and then driving away. There's footage showing the moment of the crash. So, 20 people outside this pub fighting, car comes through, plows through a whole bunch of people, and nobody comes, no cop comes for almost a half hour. Now, since April of 2020, the Chicago PD is down 25% of its officers. That might explain why it's taking time to respond to these kinds of tragedies. Ingram says Americans are getting tired of him, while Democrats got tired of him as soon as he got elected. The Republicans, they still are behind him. And the gap between Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, as far as who the Republicans want to run in 2024, has widened to almost 40 points. So based on the polls, Laura Ingram has lost her feel for how Republicans are feeling about Donald Trump. I am Larry Elder. Remember, we've got to. Ingram says Americans are getting tired of him, while Democrats got tired of him as soon as he got elected. The Republicans, they still are behind him. And the gap between Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, as far as who the Republicans want to run in 2024, has widened to almost 40 points. So based on the polls, Laura Ingram has lost her feel for how Republicans are feeling about Donald Trump. I am Larry Elder. Remember, we've got